In today's episode, we're talking to Dane Gagnon, Carol Jors, and Tony Nunez about creativity, what it is, where it comes from, and how to nurture it. Stick around, it's going to be a good one. Well, I'm super excited about this episode about creativity. I just love the topic. I just have so much respect for the process, the output that people, with some of the ideas that people come up with and those types of things. So I was really excited about this particular episode. And that was also very evident that our employee population was super stoked about this because there was a tremendous amount of questions that came in, probably more questions than I've seen come in for any of the episodes that we've posted about. So it's pretty neat. And really good questions too. So I'll be asking some of those questions on behalf of the employees that submitted it throughout this. Before we dive in, I want to get into my guests here. These three guests I have a tremendous amount of respect for. But before I get into them, I just want to warn you guys, my voice is a little off. I had a bit of a spring cold and I'm not sure where it came from, and I'm just trying to survive. So I will do my best to not clear my throat and all that good stuff. But first, I guess we'll start out with, because I'm just seeing you right here, but Tony Nunez, he's a filmmaker on our talent brand team. Carol Jors, creative writer and storyteller. We've got Dane Gagnon, art director for Aquint. Worked with you for a while now, all of you. So with that, what I want to ask you guys is to say what you do, how long you've been with the company, and what you enjoy most about your job. Start with you.
Cool, yeah, I'll start off. So my name's Tony Nunez, and my position is talent brand content creator, or probably vice versa. Content creator for talent brand. And I've been here for close to a year now. I think next month will be full 12 months. So it's been great working on these talent videos with Anthony and with Caitlin. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Carol Jors. I've actually been with the company for 25 years. I work in all different parts of the company. I do internal and external content creation. And my favorite part of what I do is that I can talk to an executive, I can talk to someone that's working on the line, I can talk to anyone, hear their story, retell it, and when they tell me that's exactly what I would have said, that's the greatest compliment ever.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Very cool. And you're great at what you do, so cool. Dane.
Yeah, I'm Dane Gagnon. I'm with Aquint.
That's how you say your last name.
Yes, I know, it's a mystery, right? I'm like, thanks, Grandpa, for giving me like the weirdest.
So say it again.
Gagnon.
Gagnon.
Who knows? I've already spent way too much of my life explaining how to say it. But yeah, so
it's cool. Great last name.
It's very French. We'll say that. It's very French. So I'm the art director here with Aquint. So Aquint actually is a separate entity outside of Rockwell, but I'm dedicated to the Rockwell account. So I'm here every day, live and breathe the brand. I think one of the most kind of interesting aspects of my day, I see a lot of different media, always kind of keeping a pulse on the brand, is that Aquint was actually able to have a hand in developing that brand, which is such a unique, rare opportunity for an agency. So it's been so exciting, and we're just love seeing it go to scale.
I think what's the most interesting thing about that particular project is there's not a lot of companies that go through these big brand efforts, and right. I think the last time we had done it was like 15 years ago, so you were part of really big initiatives. So very cool, and kudos to you and the team for what you guys came up with. So it's exciting stuff. Cool. Well, with that, let's just dive in. So again, I had mentioned that we had some employees submit some questions. And so what I want to talk about first is just creativity. Everything from what it is, how you nurture it, that sort of stuff. So we had a question come in on Yammer from Alina Dunn. I'm sure I'm saying her name wrong, so I'm sorry, Elena. But her question was, how do you define creativity? From your perspective, is creativity a trait we are born with, a skill that can be developed, both, or something entirely different? And so similar question for me is creativity a type of person, or is it a mindset? So I don't know. Anyone care to answer that?
I will take that. I think if you're curious, you're creative. When you lose your curiosity, you get less creative. So as long as you show an interest in something and you want to learn more about it, that creativity will come out in different ways. I think traditionally people say that if you can draw, sing, dance, or in the arts, that's creative. But in Rockwell, everyone technically, if your job is technical, whatever you're doing, you have to apply your unique skills to it, your problem-solving skills to it. You can do what you've always done, or you can apply some creativity. So you are probably your own worst enemy if you don't think you're creative, because I believe you were born that way.
Yeah, no, I love that. Actually, one thing that we used to say when I was a part of the internal communications team, Tressa used to say this a lot, but she would refer to our team as creative problem solvers. And I do. I feel like our employee population, whether you're in a technical role that maybe doesn't feel like there's a lot of creativity, I think what it comes down to is when you've got a problem to solve, you can be creative about how you approach that problem. I don't know. I mean, you guys obviously see that with some of the projects that might come through from clients, and you have to, there's a bazillion ideas and ways to approach the project, but I know your guys' project processes, and it's around, okay, well, what are you guys trying to achieve? And then let's figure out what's the most effective way to do that, right?
Right. I mean, I would just say to further your point, I agree. I think everyone is creative and capable of being creative, but I also think that people can be taught to be more creative, right, and to think in a more creative capacity. So it's something we all innately have, but you're right, you have to use it and do it and actively engage in it, or you might lose it, or it just doesn't become part of your process to solve problems or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I believe the same thing. It's just, I think it's a mindset. Seeing my kids, they're, at a young age right now, and just seeing them kind of, when we tell them to draw a picture of the same thing, and they end up coming up with two different versions of the same thing. It's crazy how the mind works, how we picture things differently when they're the same. And I think we all have that in us, and it doesn't go away. It's all a process. And I feel like it is a tool. As we get older, I feel like we do have to kind of hone in on it and work on it. But I think we all have it, and I don't think it's going to go away.
Yeah. I actually love when people are, to your point with your kids, you ask them to do the same thing and the output's always different. I love projects or things like that where people are asked to, workshops typically, where they're asked to do, okay, I want you guys to come up with a way to do this, and then everyone comes with these different ideas. It's insane. I was listening to something the other day where they were talking about two groups were asked to figure out what you can do with a paperclip, and one group came up with pretty typical things, but it was still, granted, a bunch of different ideas, and then the other one came up with very abstract things, but again, same question, both good output on both sides, but just very different.
Right.
I don't know. So interesting. Oh, and actually, so I think we've answered this a little bit in some of our responses to some of these to the questions that came up. But in what ways does creativity show up?
Oh man, that's. I think creativity shows up everywhere. Really, when you wake up in the morning, when you, you put on your clothes. That's a form of you being creative in how you want to look that day.
How you're gonna express yourself.
Yeah, how you express yourself, and the colors that you choose, or if you don't choose colors. My case, I just wear black because it's simple. But do I want to wear holes in it or not? And so that's part of my morning creative discussion, right? How do I want to look? And even with food, food is a creative thing. Like when you eat, you have a preference and you like it a certain way. Like I like over medium eggs, but my wife likes scrambled eggs, and that's a process, a mental process. And so I think there's creativity everywhere. We just don't. I think we overlook it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just becomes normal, but it's there.
So let's keep a lookout for it.
Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to riff off that, I almost feel like it's like anytime there's a choice to be made, there's an opportunity, right, for some creativity. How you're going to approach it, and I don't always want to say solve that problem, but there's something that you're encountering, and then you're making a decision to.
Yeah.
The problem is that people fear their choice, and they think that there's a wrong or a right, or they're not as creative as they could be, and then they take all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
So when you're doing that food dish, and you think, well, this isn't turning out the way it did on TV, and now it's not fun, it's not creative, or I don't look the way.
Fail?
Right. I like the Pinterest fails, actually, because I think that's really what that's
They're
about.
more creative, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like their version of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's easier if you don't set out, if it's just part of the nature,
Right.
as opposed to working so hard at it and then feeling judgmental of yourself.
Right.
Yeah. All right, I want to move into what inspires each of you. I think this is a cool portion of this conversation. But a question came in from Joanna Dembika. I don't know. I'm sure I'm terrible at this, but she asked, and by the way, she's a colleague of mine. I love her. She's great.
Sorry, Joanna.
Her question was more a statement, but I'd be curious to know how to fuel one's creativity. So I was thinking the same thing, right? Like, so what type of environment do each of you thrive in? What do you need in order to feel creative and that sort of thing? So I think that's just so interesting.
Yeah,
you'll have different environments that you work in.
Yeah, no. I think for me, it's changed. It's changed because we live in a world where information is being handed to you at a million miles per hour.
Yeah.
And your brain is I think it over processes everything that we see. And so I feel less creative when I see other people's work because it's so much. I just don't know how to process it.
Yeah.
So when I feel the most creative it's super funny. It's when I'm in my car. So I have about an hour commute from here to my house. And in that 1 hour quiet time where if I'm listening to a podcast or listening to news podcast, whatever it is, I feel like my brain is quiet and it can process things a little bit simpler. Or even if I'm just not listening to anything, I'm just listening to the road, I start thinking about projects or what I can do that's outside of my normal comfort zone, right? Mm-hmm. So that for me is, to be honest, the most creative time I have, and that's what inspires me. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I'm opposite of you since I have no commute, since I work from a home office, which has its own challenges. Yeah. There's no downtime like that. But what I find is if you are blocked creatively, I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll read some really good writing. That could be anything. That could be a blog. That could just be the Skim newsletter. Yeah. And over time, you learn not to compare yourself or say, they did it better. I say, that's beautiful writing. Mm-hmm. And then when you are immersed in that, you can then return to what you were going to do, feeling a little bit more infused. That could be a music break. Everybody should be taking some type of break in their day if they want to get a creative juice flowing. Sitting at your desk for hours doesn't help you. You might feel productive, but it's probably not your best work or your best creative work.
Yeah, and I'm a bit the same as you. Well, I find maybe it's even like a blend, and I'm sure we're all fairly kind of fluid with our creative process and what brings it out of us, but I'll sometimes do like a creative binge, if you will, where I want to see it all. I need to get out of my own box, and I'll even jump on Instagram or awards website or whatever, just a place that I know I'll get some good stuff. But then, I'll need that quiet time to then bring it back and say, okay, of that arsenal of things that I saw and just looked at and admired and maybe felt a little jealous, what can I do and pull out and then plug into what I'm doing? Because no, I'm not doing a collage with glitter paint and a unicorn, but there's something in there that I can extract from there and apply that to elevate my own work. So
there's like little bits and pieces in there too. I totally agree. Like in what when I do want to get inspired and I have like a certain, say if I'm working on a project and it has a certain mood or a feel, I start diving into movies that I really like that have similar feels, and then I pull from there. To the point where I think I can start crafting my own. So if I marry the two, the quiet times and processing what I visually saw, is where I get really inspired to then come on set or come on the job and connect the dots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you change what you do once you get the scene, or you think I was going to do it this way and now?
Oh, totally. You can come in with a game plan, a storyboard, like a complete layout, and it never comes out the way you pictured it. And that's okay.
That's part of it, though.
Yeah, it is part of it.
It's not stopping it and saying, that's different than I thought.
Yeah. Well, same for you. Like when you write something, do you kind of write it in your head and then something comes out different?
You start, when I interview people, I'll think, well, this is where it's going to go. And then they'll say something that's either so inspiring or awesome. I love it when I talk to someone and they tell me something brand new, mind-blowing, never thought of that. And then it all changes. And usually from that statement, a different angle is found. But it's because you didn't say no.
Right.
This is my plan.
Right.
Back to, and I love with the different processes and that kind of thing too. Is there a physical environment that you guys would prefer? So, and I came across a tweet the other day, and I didn't click into the article yet. I think I saved it, but there was an article where someone, because I obviously follow a lot of creatives, marketers, that kind of stuff, but they tested like different environments, and I think by the end of it, you'll know which one they prefer, whether it's like being outdoors, you know, in a more collaborative environment, that sort of stuff. Do you have a preference? Do you need a quiet space? Do you prefer riffing off of other people and brainstorming and that kind of stuff? Like, what kind of environment do you think you feel most creative in?
I mean, for me, it would be like I generally like some sense of like white noise or peripheral something. Yeah. So whether I'm in a coffee shop and I'm not engaging with anybody, but I hear the clanks of the cups or whatever. I mean, I think for a lot of people, maybe not everyone, but again, like a space that I'm feeling comfortable, you know, clean space. Doesn't even have to be like well lit per se if we're talking about the actual physicality of it. But I do need to feel. I don't want to feel like anxious or like I don't know about the space, because I want to just really focus all my energy on getting that solution. So everything just needs to kind of help me facilitate that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of different places depending on like how I'm feeling. You know, sometimes I just want to just complete silence and for me to process. But then I get inspired by people watching, you know, and seeing how people operate outside, you know, and if I'm in a coffee shop too, I love working there. I kind of love seeing how people interact with each other and how they're dressed or, you know, if they're by themselves or if they're with someone, and I get really inspired by that and thoughts and ideas start to come up, you know? So it kind of depends, you know, for me.
Same with me. I mean, I can relate. You know, so oftentimes what I find even over here, when I'm in the office here at global headquarters, sometimes I need to, well, a lot of the times I just need to get out of my office and I need natural light. So I go across to the customer experience center, and if I have to write, that's probably one of my favorite places to write. So that's one environment. The other environment I love, and sometimes I'll see you online, but it's at, you know, 5 a.m. in the morning over a cup of coffee, when I'm not being interrupted by anyone, right? Except for when I start interrupting her. But I know she'll be online writing. Yeah. And that's typically when I'm doing a lot of my writing and that sort of thing too.
That's something to honor in your creative space, is when you're creative. So if that's in the morning, and acknowledge that 3 o'clock in the afternoon is probably not your best time, and then try not to struggle through it. And if that's 11 o'clock at night, so I honor the morning times as the time the best stuff gets done. Right. And then later you can go back and edit or do other less creative required tasks. So that's, sometimes we've exchanged great ideas and solved problems before anybody else has actually gotten online.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, another
solves a lot of problems.
I would say like another cool thing too, when I was in Europe with Rockwell, one of the things I loved doing was just actually getting outside of my hotel and just getting lost in the city. Because then you start exploring, you see things you've never seen before, or you've seen in pictures, and then it kind of just sparks like, oh my God, like this is way different from what I'm used to. And so it's like kind of like putting it in your tool bag, you know, little things that you see, how the light hits the floor, things like that. Like the grass is a little bit different there than it is here. And so I think it just kind of rejuvenates you, you know, when you go into places unknown.
But you're noticing things.
It's true.
And that was an effort. You didn't just walk around.
It's true.
You looked.
Yeah.
What's interesting is though, and that's I've mentioned this to other people too, but one of the things that I'm fascinated by and I respect so much is, especially I can give examples with all three of you, is again, I consider myself more of a problem solver, creative writer too, and that kind of thing. But you all see things, and this goes for everyone, but see things that other people don't, right? Like with you in film, you'll capture things on film that I would have never thought to capture, or the way it was shot. It's incredible. Writing, when I come to you with writing and you know, hey, I've got this idea of this thing, right? Blog post, whatever. And you'll come back with, well, you know, maybe approach it this way. Would have never thought about that. Or even like with design, right? I've worked with you on a lot of design projects. Would have never thought to do this thing or to think about it this way. And so that's another thing that I'm fascinated by with creativity, is that just everyone has these unique things that they notice and apply to their craft. I don't know. It's just fascinating. So. All right, another question. So this one came in from Mike Martinez. He says, in improv, creativity is often described as a muscle that needs to be stretched and flexed to stay in shape. I'd love to hear Carol, Tony, and Dane share what they do to escape the routine to stretch and flex your creative muscles. I think you guys kind of answered that, but if you can answer it again.
Well, I mentioned before, I actually did improv in college, and it's a very frightening thing to do. And that is where you learn whatever's happening, you go with it and keep on building on it. So when you stretch it, stretch your creativity in a way that might not be what's comfortable for you. So I don't know that I need to stretch in writing. I do it all day. So I will probably try to do something uncomfortable, like decorate a cake for my daughter's 17th birthday yesterday. It didn't go great, but I tried because that's not my strength. But I actually had to put some effort into it and then felt okay when it was done.
Did it taste delicious?
It did.
So that matters.
Right? The effort was there. But if you want to flex, you might want to flex the muscles you don't use all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, my take on that is like working a muscle. You know, when you first start working out, you're going to be weak at it. You know, you're not going to lift as heavy as you typically would, right? But if you keep working on that same bicep over and over and increasing the weight, then eventually you're going to get a really big bicep. And for me, in film, was when I first started, for paid gigs, I started doing wedding films. It's just the thing you do to kind of learn. And with weddings, it's a one-shot deal. It's you get it or you don't, you know? And so it's kind of high risk. And so when I first started, I was making a lot of mistakes, but I remember those mistakes and I would make a mental note not to do that again. So that when I get in the situation, like my muscle has already gotten so flexed that I already can anticipate 3 seconds ahead of what's going to happen. If that kiss is going to happen at this moment or there, I know that I'm not going to miss that. Or if I want to get creative because I already know that's going to happen, then I can try something different because I feel really good in it. And I apply that to really everything, even with like corporate video talking heads. Like I can predict the light and how they're going to sit, but then I've worked that muscle so hard that I can experience or try something new with it and see if that fails, and I'm just growing that muscle. So
yeah,
that's how I think, just repetitiveness and whatnot.
Yeah,
definitely.
What about you, Dane? With like, you know, I mean, you get asked to do a variety of different things, especially when it comes to some of the visual stuff. But yeah, what about, how do you not get stuck in a rut?
Keep things fresh.
Yeah, how do you keep things fresh?
So it's interesting, you know, in my particular line of work, which we all work with and deal with, is, you know, within a brand, within a parameter, anything that's restrictive to a way. The way that I kind of keep things fresh is sometimes it sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's almost like the smaller the box, like the tighter the refinement, that it pushes you more to get an even better, simpler, more beautiful solution. I think we've all probably come up against that. And I don't want to say that's a rookie mistake, but I remember being younger and thinking like, oh my God, I can't do anything with it. You know, within this 8.5 by 11, 3 color, like this is going to be junk. And then you realize like that's actually, you kind of just get more fluent and more elegant and more agile, and you can work with very little and turn it out. And sometimes those are the best solutions. So I think, you know, some of it is a perspective and not feeling defeated by limitations or by hurdles or things like that. So keeping it fresh that way, just keeping the lens and also, yes, just inspiration of other artists too.
What I love about what you just said though is I can relate to the thing that I was thinking of when you were saying that was, you know, that you were talking about the little box. For us, sometimes it could be no budget, limited budget.
Right.
Sometimes that brings out the most creative ideas, right?
Totally.
It's so interesting how that happens. Yeah, you almost get better ideas. Yeah. Not that I want that to happen all the time, but
no, I know. We're and you're seeing it firsthand because we're experiencing that right now. You know, where we have to do a lot of these videos with little to no money, you know, and a great example is when I was in Brussels not that long ago, doing a talking head with Thomas. I traveled literally by myself with a camera and a audio pack for him to talk into, and I had to figure out, okay, where's my light going to come from? How am I going to make this room look interesting? And with all my years of experience, again with the weddings, I get dealt that situation 100% of the time. And so since I've worked that muscle out, I went into a conference room, saw everything at scope.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what I was going to do with that window. I knew exactly what I'm going to do with the shades to give shape to the table, where his coffee cup was going to go, and it's all experience. And then it ends up just looking just amazing with little to no
less
equipment,
is more.
you know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we have another question that came in from Dave Vasco, and he says, can you give some examples of creativity that's amazed you? And I had a similar question, which was basically, is there a brand or a person that you respect, follow, that inspires you? I know me personally, I have some of those, but I don't know. I was curious about you.
I have so many. Too many.
I can start
Oh,
because
yeah, go for
Dave
it.
is one of the people
Yeah.
because I interview him on a regular
Okay.
basis for his podcast, and he just has so much knowledge and so many different things. But the way he explains it makes it feel like you understand it. So now I can help you be creative. The other place I get inspiration, it's not really a brand, it's in kids, and you talked about this before. I think as a parent, one of the hard things is when your kids do something differently than you would do it, and you have to imagine that it's still right and okay, and that you want to help them, but they see things very differently, and if you can step back for a moment, it's better, it's a different solution. So when you were talking before about the different things you respect, the theme I saw is that there's not competition, it's all collaboration and making it better in the end. So if you're going to fight creatively, because your idea is bigger or better, you want to do it, you're not going to get the best result. But if you can keep passing along saying, where do you want to put your expertise? And I think kids are more natural at that because they aren't fearful. So they just do what they do. It's pure, take it for what it is.
Uninhibited.
Uninhibited, and the more uninhibited you can be, the better off the product will be.
Yep.
Yeah.
I see that actually often in some of the writing projects is, the first draft is never the draft you go with, right? You have a proof, someone go and proof it, comes back with, both feedback and they catch typos, all kinds of stuff. And then you send it to maybe a third person if you want. And anyway, it's just interesting because that final product is always better than that original. And it's because you brought in more people.
Well, and people don't like to be edited, and they don't want advice sometimes. But honestly, other opinions are really great as long as it made it better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Go to the right people too. I guess
Right.
that's the other thing.
Yeah, for the person that stuck out to me when you asked the question, and this is going to sound so funny, was Sylvester Stallone. And for the reason that when he wrote Rocky, he was denied so many times. And part of the reason was because he wanted to be in it. And the producers, the directors couldn't picture him an actor or whatnot. And so someone took a risk on him, invested $1 million into his script. And now look at it's Rocky, the franchise, the unforgettable. He was really resilient and rejection was not an option. No was not an option. Eventually, he got what he wanted, but it's just I feel like rejection is hard, and as an artist, it could be devastating at times. And so for someone to be an artist and be able to take rejection, that's super inspiring.
Yeah. So I'm curious then too, because so let's just say you guys do produce something and you get feedback, either someone wants it a certain way, that kind of stuff. How do you deal with that? So again, I do see this a lot of times. There might be something I'm super proud of when I write and I send it off to the next person and it changes completely. And for me, I've trained myself to be open-minded to okay, there's a reason, this is better. But yeah, how do you guys process rejection or feedback that maybe you were hoping it was just wow, this is amazing, but it wasn't?
Yeah. Man, I would say rejection, it can vary in what I do. Because sometimes the projects could be my baby. I gave birth to it. I wrote it out. I had an idea and vision for it. And for me to even pitch it to somebody is kind of my vulnerability in saying, this is what I came up with. Do you like it? and then you hear, well, it's not that great. That rejection it could be heartbreaking, and yeah, I feel like I don't deal with it very well. So I don't really, I don't put myself out there until I really know that this idea is really, really good.
Sure.
But I also apply to say if you have an idea and I cook up something that we're collaborating on. Mm-hmm. The rejection is okay. Well, we can collaborate on. We can kind of meet in the middle, and that's okay. You know. But I think when it comes to those super personal projects where it's just from the heart, rejection could be just devastating. it can ruin you. You just want to throw the project away. And I think that's why Rocky why he inspires me. Because if I was him, I would have said, oh well, they're right. It's probably gonna suck. It's not going to be good. I'm not going to be a good actor, but that wasn't his mindset. It was, I'm just going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
I think the fear of the rejection is what people, it's why they're not creative because they don't want to put the idea out there.
Yeah.
So I think it has to do with how you take it is with the intent it's delivered.
Yeah.
So if someone says to me, that's not what I envisioned, and I can say, what did you envision? And they can be specific, that's helpful.
Yeah.
And if they say, I don't know, but that's not it, that's not helpful, and I probably can't take it any further than that.
Yeah.
But if it's a give and take, or I would have liked this, then you can build off of it. But if it's just to reject it, I just don't want people to be afraid of being creative and trying something new, because you don't know what the other person's intent was.
Right.
Just be kind in feedback, people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
good advice.
and I think that's a good point. I mean, intent is such a big part of it. Where the critique's coming from, and I mean, I've had to learn too. The sooner you can walk away from ego and really let that go, you will make bigger strides. But it's hard. I still struggle with it. I probably always will, because we take pride in these things. They're our babies. We've thought of them. Yeah. I will also say though, on another note, I'm like, sometimes I'll have one of my designers come to me and say, oh, they didn't like blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, well, do you care what your dad thinks about your outfit? Probably not. So don't worry about it. It's like these people, some people, it's not their forte. It's not where they sing. It's not, they're not the expert. So of course, let's hear it. Let's take that in. But we know our stuff and we know what we're doing. And that's where it's that dance between pushing back and, and hearing your client out and things like that. But I don't ever want it to, a critique to undermine what someone does know and knows well.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next section of this conversation, which was really around fostering creativity in others. We had some questions come in about that, because that's what you all do. A question came in from Beth Parkinson, and she asked, can you give some examples of how you're helping others foster their creativity? I'm sure you guys have a lot of examples, but if you could maybe talk about that.
You can go ahead.
Sure. One of the things I think I do really well and have to do well in my job is I ask questions. Mm-hmm. And if I'm getting answers that are kind of typical, I ask other questions or have conversation, and I make it become rather unexpected. So I'm fostering their thinking process, which is going to make what they're giving me more creative and more heartfelt. Sometimes it's harder than others. Sometimes people want to be very specific or technical, and then I return with what do you want people to know about what you're talking about? I need you to think about the readers, the listeners, whoever's receiving this information is not just you reporting it out. So let's find our path. But if you ask really good questions and then you listen to the answers, you're going to get because a lot of people ask questions and then they go on to the next question in their head and they never actually listen. But you need to play off the next thing that's said. And when people are heard, they will tell you all kinds of great, creative, wonderful things that turn into a great end product.
Yeah, I would agree. Asking questions will help. Yeah.
I mean, in my role, a little different, but being an art director and I'm setting a tone or a cadence for design, and so I take it upon myself that I need to give whoever's working within that brand or with those assets tools to do the job, to be creative, right? Yes, people can be creative a lot of different ways, and it's part of my job to channel that creativity and channel those end products. So if I'm not giving them tools, whether that's an approach to a design or just actual design elements, then I'm not fostering creativity. So sometimes I think it's the physical assets too of, if someone else is being creative, that we can give them just so they can hit the ground running and get to an amazing result quicker.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. In my line of work, I think is understanding the audience, because when a client has something or an idea, there's an audience that they need to target, and I think if you go about video content the wrong way, you're going to attract the wrong audience. It's either they're not going to really care about what you're putting out, or they're just not going to understand, why do I care, Mm-hmm. So if you understand the audience, then you can really make your piece of content directed to them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
All right, so this question was funny, just the way it was written. So this one comes in from Michelle Mathai, and she says, what would you say to people who say, I'm not creative, I used to be creative, but I'm not anymore? How do we break out of the rut of believing only other people are creative? Asking for a friend, ... winky face. So what would you say to someone that came to you and said, I'm just not creative?
I think this applies to a lot of people who don't feel like they're in creative jobs. You are the subject matter expert of your job, so only you know certain things about it. It's time then to take a step back and think, do I have the courage to do things differently than they've been done before? And to at least try. Do I have a supportive network of people who are going to give me really good feedback? Am I okay going down some dead ends and not see those as failure? If you're okay with those, you have the creativity and you need to apply it, whether that's Michelle's job, whatever your job is in the field, in the home office, you know more than anyone else. So start to think about what you know and how you could do something differently than you did it yesterday or this morning. Just give it some thought. And once you succeed at one thing, more is going to start bubbling up and you'll get more comfortable with it and you'll fear failure less.
I think too, even just the word creative or the concept has always had kind of like an elite air to it, and some of that's been by design. And sometimes we foster that, and we want it to feel exclusive or whatever. So it's a societal kind of viewpoint, I think. But yes, to your point, and as we've all said, we are all creative in different capacities. You do need to give yourself a license. And if you don't, then fine, but you'll have a shortchanged experience and maybe won't hit, whatever potential is there. So, I mean, I think it's fair to acknowledge the climate of creatives and, fashion industry and things like that. But it is all kind of just like hullabaloo, right? Yeah. I mean, when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I feel like when, and I think it's just maybe like a marketing thing, but like when someone says, "Oh, that person's creative," for me, it automatically I think of like Andy Warhol, who is just out of the box, strange, right? just weird, but for some reason people are attracted to his artwork, right? And so I think that's where it kind of gets a little iffy, and we're comparing ourselves to, like an Andy Warhol. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. I think like I said earlier, we're all creative in our own ways. Like even doing your hair is a way of you expressing your creativity. Mm-hmm. So even if it's that simple, or if it's as complex as what you're saying is in your job, like if you have a problem within your job that's pretty new or it's never happened, you have to problem solve that. You have to figure that out on your own, and that's embracing your creativity and how you would do it, because if I had that same problem, I would do it my way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing too with, I think with this audience, we had a lot of questions about that. I would say followed the theme of, what if you're not creative, and how do you get more creative? How do you nurture that creativity? But I would continue to argue that it really comes down to the creativity comes out in how you approach something. So again, if your job is to figure out how to address whether it's this customer issue or that sort of thing, I think it's all in the process is where the creativity is. So for example, I think what people need to do is stop and ask themselves when they are trying to solve a problem. I think people that feel that they're not creative typically go to what's worked for them in the past, but I think that's where you can run into problems, because our world evolves and it evolves quickly. And so that's where creativity come in. Stop and ask yourself some questions around, well, what has changed where maybe this needs a new approach? And so some other questions came in too that were like, well, what if you've got these, you have these like compliance related guidelines that you have to stick with and that kind of stuff. You're not going to get around those, but you might also be able to, if you notice that something has to change, and maybe it warrants a bigger conversation, and maybe it requires a lot more work, you have to be prepared for that. But that's where creativity can come, where you can maybe build a case then to say, hey, the world has changed. We have to do this differently. Maybe we have to lobby for different laws around this. Like it could result in that. And again, that's where that creativity can come through. So I think that's a good segue into then another question that comes in from Matt Mazurek, where he says, how do we prepare and anticipate with some of the resistance that comes from proposing creative ideas sometimes, right? I mean, that's pretty natural to be like, oh man, that's very different than what we've done it before. So how do you react? How do you respond? That kind of thing.
That's part of that thicker skin that just comes from experience, because I think creativity, we get to be judgmental and we have assumptions about it, that there's a group of creatives and they dress and act a certain way, but I'm not one of those. So it's really about your willingness to say something that might not be expected or might not be proven. And that's everybody's job. And know that someone is going to say the phrase I really dislike, which is, I'm just going to be the devil's advocate, which means I'm shutting you down and I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And then that just kills the creativity in a room. So if you can be strong enough to say, I have an idea, let's build from that, and something will come. But you have to be willing to raise your hand, and you might think in your head, I'm not a creative. That's the first problem you have to overcome, because you actually are.
What I love about the response, though, it just had me thinking about, I've had conversations with some people who are like, my idea, no one likes my ideas. And I'm like, well, what was it about it that they didn't like? Well, and I asked them too, like, well, how much thought did you put into it? It's like, oh, well, I just threw out the idea. But I would say that sometimes it's not just about throwing out the idea. You got to put in some research. You got to show why this idea might be a good idea, or say how the idea can be executed, because people can have a million ideas, but you got to find which one sticks and then figure out how to make it work. But you're going to have to convince someone sometimes that it can work.
And it has to matter to you because you have to see it through. So if you're just throwing it out and you don't have conviction or passion around it, but if you really feel strongly and did your research, that's creative.
Yeah, for sure.
And it still might not be the one they select. They got to try it again.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think a lot of it is just sticking to your guns. If you really believe in the idea and that it can really work, stick to your guns. Yeah. Because as we're talking, I'm thinking of Shark Tank. A lot of these guys come in with a lot of ideas, and it's so funny to see the aftermath of some of the products that the sharks did not invest in, which ended up being very, very successful. But it's because that person stuck to their guns. Imagine if you're standing in front of investors like that, you pitch this idea, and they are just like, take it out to the bar and shoot it. It's the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. Kevin O'Leary always says. And to see the response of just like, okay, that's their opinion, but I believe in this product so much that I'm just going to continue. And I think that's just sticking to your guns. You had an idea, you believe in it, just keep going. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think the other element to that too is meeting your audience where they're at, right? It kind of your point. If they're visual, or they need to see and feel and experience certain things. If you have a traditionally creative mind, or you're a visual thinker like I am, I can envision something on the wall that's not there. A lot of people can't do that, and that's all right. They're just thinking in different capacities. So I think sometimes, it's like the art of the pitch too, and sometimes they don't even like your pitch, how good it is.
That's right. Yeah.
But absolutely, it's like hone your act too.
Yep.
People like say, well, I threw my idea, no one liked it. It's like, you give me one sentence and then you look down. Of course I'm not into that. So I think that's part of it too. I mean, presentation is key front to back.
Yeah. Completely agree. All right, to wrap this up, this is a question I love to ask everyone at the end of these episodes. But what is a book or podcast that you've read, you're reading, that you'd recommend to our audience?
So for me, it's a Dax Shepard podcast called Armchair Expert, and I love it so much for the reason, and there's so many podcasts out there, they're informational and comical, whatever, but what I love about this podcast is the guy is just blatantly honest, and I feel like we lack that. A lot of what we see in social media is kind of our highlights and not our real life, it's like the best of, but with this guy, when he talks to his guest, he has no filter. He tells it all it is and how his experiences were, and there's just no sugarcoating it. Yeah. And that sense of honesty is just super refreshing.
And speaking of honesty, I don't know if you two listen to that podcast too, but I do. I just find it hilarious. Yeah. But what I love is he has a fact checker.
Oh, that's true.
And that, because again, he'll just say things and he thinks he has the right answer.
Exactly.
Again, being transparent, or his fact checker will come back and say, yeah, Jack this was right. He was wrong on
exactly.
This. So I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, and he's just super humble about it. He's like, oh yeah, so yeah, I thought it was right, and so I was obviously wrong, know, and that's again to the honesty thing. Is like if we're wrong at something, we try to hide it or pretend like it never happened. This guy's like, he just embraces it.
Yeah. So that's
Armchair
cool. Expert.
Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got me onto that one, actually. I have a list of ones you've recommended, but Mark Maron's podcast, not appropriate for all audiences, but it will make you laugh. I gotta listen to things.
That's the name of it. Not appropriate for all. Okay.
Oh no, that was my commentary. I just put it out there in case somebody's shocked.
That's a clever podcast.
NSFW.
but should they? I can't say the name. I can't say the name because there's actually words we can't say.
Okay, gotcha.
So just look it up. Maron. Oh, to the bleeping part. I also like to read quick newsletters that send you on to other topics, like the Skim or the Thrive newsletter, because then you can spend 5 minutes, just enough time, and you can pick your topics. So those are easy reads for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts. A lot of them are just like show recaps and whatever. There's a design one I do like called Design Matters with Debbie Milliman, I believe. And she just interviews a host of, designers, anyone in any type of creative field. So that's just good for inspiration. And it can be kind of motivating too. Some of these people either came from nothing and now they're, have a whole empire.
Yeah.
I will say, and this maybe seems weird, but I do get a lot of creativity and kind of creative energy from humor and comedy, which I think we all do.
Yeah.
And I almost think it's like underutilized and under-recognized. So I listen to this podcast called Watch What Crappens. And it's like, they just like poke fun at all the Bravo shows, but it can bring me to a place that's super light and fun. And it's like, it's like caricatures of these already insane people.
Yeah.
But honestly, the humor can really just like spark that bit of endorphin to keep me going, to push that next idea or whatever. So I would say, to people, just leverage whatever gets you going. It doesn't matter if it's, seemingly superfluous or silly or whatever.
Yeah.
Just do it.
I'll be checking that one out. Yeah. Because there's a lot of Bravo shows I just absolutely hate, and so if they're making fun of them, that'll be hilarious.
Yeah. These people, they love the shows, but they see the the comedy in it, so it's good.
Good. Okay, for mine, I've mentioned this podcast before, but I think it's relevant to this particular topic. But it was Work Life by Adam Grant. And it was, I forgot what the title was, but basically it's an episode where he goes into the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and he gets to familiar with sort of their creative process. And I just think it's super interesting how they produce these shows on a daily basis, actually, and the humor, the fact that they've got such good episodes that are just funny every single time is just incredible. So I would recommend that one. So
yeah, one thing I would say about podcasts, which has been blowing up lately, and obviously we're doing one right now, is I feel like there's one for every industry and every kind of niche, genre.
Yeah.
And one thing that I do love is because there's so many variations. I do listen to podcasts where it's my industry, like the guys that talk to DPs or directors or filmmakers, and then get their perspectives. And it's so cool to hear other people's perspective in what you do.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you take bits and pieces from like their experience and you go, oh my God, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually apply that to what I do. Mm-hmm. So I do highly recommend it. Just do some research and find those podcasts, and I think that would help out in working that creative muscle like I spoke about. So,
totally.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you all so much. This episode was awesome. Thank you for your time. Thank you for agreeing to talk about creativity. And appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
That was fun.